After we studied why the aggregate demand curve is a downward sloping curve, we need to move on to the next topic, why the aggregate demand curve will shift. So let's look at the first graph here. It says there's an increase in the nominal money supply. So if the money supply increased, how could this shift aggregate demand curve? Shift to the left or right? We have to rely on the model we learned previously, liquidity preference model. In the liquidity preference model here, interest rate, real money balance. And we know real money supply, M over P, is a vertical curve. And the money demand is a downward sloping curve. So the money supply increase means the Fed take expansionary monetary policy. And we can see on the supply of the money side, the nominal M increased. With the same level of the price level, the real money supply also increased. So what happened to the interest rate? Because the real money supply increased, the whole money supply curve M prime P S will shift to the right. As a result, the equilibrium interest rate will go down. So increase in the nominal money supply indicate interest rate goes down. Then we can find out what happened to the aggregate demand. Again, when we analyze aggregate demand, you have to rely on this equation. Aggregate expenditure is consumption plus investment plus government spending and net export. With lower level of the interest rate, we got from the liquidity preference model. We know the household will spend more money because the cost of the borrowing money reduces, so the consumption goes up. Meanwhile, because the interest rate goes down, firms would like to borrow more money and spend money on the investment, buying machine, building the new factories. So investment jump up as well. And we can see here the aggregate demand or aggregate expenditure will go up because of the increase in the consumption and the investment. Because aggregate expenditure go up, it means aggregate demand goes up as well. The whole aggregate demand curve will shift to the right. So that's how we analyze what happened to the aggregate demand curve if there's increase in the money supply. The key here is the money supply will change the interest rate. The interest rate is the channel that connect the money market and the goods market. So let's move on to the second factor. If expected future income goes up, what happened to the aggregate demand curve? Let's write out this equation again. If the people expect their future income to go up, and the people probably will spend more money buying goods and services. Yeah, try to imagine if you get a really good job and you paycheck will jump up a lot, you probably will start to spend more money. So which means the consumption, this component, will go up, which push up the aggregate demand, aggregate expenditure, and means aggregate demand goes up. So the whole demand curve, aggregate demand curve, will shift to the right. When the government increase the expenditure in the third case, and we know this is a fiscal policy, this policy has nothing to do with the central bank. When the government increases the spending, this is a tool used by the federal government and the Congress. So the fiscal policy, government spending increase. So how could this affect aggregate expenditure? With this equation, we learn it's a pretty straightforward. Other things remaining same. If the government spending increase, G goes up. So aggregate expenditure go up. Means the demand for the goods and the service from the whole society, aggregate demand goes up. That's the reason when you look at the graph, the aggregate demand curve will shift to the right. And let's move on to the next case. If the firm expects the future profit will go up, what happened to the aggregate demand? Yeah, I already say the profit is related to the firm's decision. If a firm expects future profit to go up, they probably will buy more machine and increase the investment in the equipment to produce more goods and service. So which means the second component, investment, will jump up, and it will cause the aggregate demand or aggregate expenditure to go up. So that's the reason aggregate demand curve shift to the right. And let's move on to the last case. There's an increase in the business tax. So which means the government collect more taxes from the business. If the business have to pay more taxes to the government, the profit will go down because profit is after tax income. Yeah, you can imagine if the firms pay more taxes, their after tax income will go down. And then rely on our equation here. If the business see their profit goes down, the business probably are going to make less investment. So the second component here, I, goes down. Holding other things constant, this will cause the aggregate expenditures to go down. It means the aggregate demand from the whole society will go down as well. So that's the reason the aggregate demand curve will shift to the left. So overall, we go over the 5 different cases, and you can see the equation we learned, aggregate expenditure equation, that include the 4 components, are very important to solve this type of the question. Plus, the first case, when we talk about the money, you have to think about the liquidity preference model to determine whether aggregate demand curve will shift to the left or right.